welcome, welcome. Today on East Meets West, I have a special guest all the way from the UK. Joining us is Sadhna. She is a trained lawyer with multiple degrees, LLB honors and LLM, and she is a change maker and what should I say, engagement consultant, transformational coach and mentor with the sole purpose of connecting people to their purpose and living excellence in their environment. So, as I said, Sadhna is from the UK. She has over 30 years of experience and of knowledge in different industries, private, public, SME market, and running small business, finance, banking, you name it. She have it. And some, of her top companies that she would have worked with were American Express, Canada Life, HSBC, and Goldman Sachs, and many others. So Sadhna's background in legal and working as a professional with experience in the culture change and transformation space. She is well versed with people challenges and getting buy-in from leadership teams to ensure high standards of performance, retention, and business growth. So it's for her, it's about inspiring and connecting leaders and employees to their vision, their values, behaviors, and the goals of their organization. So let me not speak more because Sadhna has a really interesting topic here today that we're speaking on emotional intelligence for leaders. And indeed, we cannot do justice to this topic with just a few minutes we're going to be on air with this. So, whatever little you can get out of it, take it, learn from it, share your comments and questions to Sadhna. Will be happy to answer them. So welcome, Sadhna.
Thank you, Shanti, for having me. That was a very nicely said, about me. I'm really appreciative of coming to your platform and discussing my favorite subject, because nowadays the key to leadership success is emotional intelligence, and and people get scared by it, So again, thank you so much for having me. And, let's start with the question. When it comes to perfect leader, what comes to mind?
Okay, so in my opinion, I will share. The word perfect, it's kind of scary because defining perfect is something that all of us might see it in a different way. But if I'm to say, on leadership side of it, good, good leaders or great leaders, according to Jim Collins, good to great, and how, leaders, I would say today, are leaders who shows the way, goes the way, knows the way, according to John Maxwell. And good leaders are the people who, yes, live out good values, who genuinely care for their people, genuinely care not only for the organization, but the people who are in those organizations, the people that they're serving, I would say. And so for me, it's a lot about servant leadership and how our people grow and how do they get better. So I could talk so much on leadership right now. My opinion about how, good leaders and what they look like, their values, their behaviors, and, their whole discipline. But I know your topic here today is going to touch a big aspect of what this leadership looks like, in the future, now and in the future, and where we are heading comparing to what we were taught leadership was about in the past. So
Exactly, I couldn't agree with you more. When it's mentioned about what makes a good leader, we are looking at self leadership, self maintenance of how to improve you as a leader and help your people you're managing and performing. I mean, one of leadership concept with emotional intelligence was benchmarked by a psychologist called Daniel Goleman. He's one of my favorite authors in working with emotional intelligence. It's a really good book to read. So if you have the time to want to learn more, and then he developed 5 concepts to leadership, and he said self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy and social skills are the five elements that makes a truly highly emotionally intelligent leader. But we only have a short time, so we're not going to be able to touch on all of them, but we can certainly, start with, when I said what comes to a perfect leader in mind. To me personally, do you have leaders where, there's no conflict based management, there's very calm and collect, the leaders who listen to their people who they work with, and that is just the small nugget of what makes an emotionally intelligent leader. And the other thing is, people get scared with the word emotional intelligence because, 95% people do think that they're emotionally intelligent, but it's only 5% of people, it's study research has shown, they are highly emotionally intelligent leaders who understand their, their self awareness of how to lead, if that makes sense, Shanti.
Yes, it does. And maybe we are in denial. We're thinking that we have a high emotional intelligence and we don't have it. Then sometimes, yeah, you need to step back and see, truly where am I at with this here? And self-awareness, oh boy, there's so many books and articles and studies now coming out about self-awareness, and as leaders, how aware are we of our emotions, and understanding it, dealing with it, even helping other people through theirs. But you go ahead.
Yeah, so it's it's because to me, right, so one of the things when I started on this journey of emotional intelligence, because I was working with myself. In fact, the live you did on Facebook about the backstory, letting go, looking at the review mirror, that was excellent, because that's what emotional intelligence part of it comes from, because you're letting go of the past. Most people are either looking forward in the future rather than being present of now, as leaders, what's happening within their emotions, what they're touching on, how they're feeling, right? So the first step of self-awareness to becoming a great leader is being aware of your emotions, how you're reacting with your emotions around the people you work with, or even at home. Because if you think about it, we at the
Mhm.
pressure, even COVID is a perfect example, right? Because everybody's working under pressure cooker, because they're all external world is taking over. So it's like, how do you manage your families, your work, and your teams, right? Your staff, your businesses, however you're working. And I think it's such a good concept of being self-aware. To me, is huge. It's a key to surviving your emotions.
Yep, definitely. And I think part of it is that sometimes we are so much in a bubble that we're not even aware, we can't even recognize that somebody is actually controlling us.
Yes.
And I think when we are aware, what is our trigger point here, what ticks me, what makes me happy, what are the things that I do that helps me feel good, it's so many things that, do we actually even pay attention to those
Yeah.
things, to know those things? And sometimes you ask people some personal questions about themselves and they're not able to answer because they've never actually observed themselves
Mhm.
per se. Yeah. So, self-awareness, being able to recognize your emotion and even how it affects you, how it affects others, how does other people's emotion too. It's so important that you are able to recognize. And yes, day before yesterday, I had a customer. I was observing actually this customer with one of our team member, and this guy was going on at a rate, and I thought to myself, how aware that he is right now to see that something or somebody else is pushing his button. Okay,
Yes.
he was so upset with the government. He's upset with how prices are increasing, and he
Yeah.
could not have understand what was happening on the world market, but he just went on, and my poor team member got so scared how he started to react. And so it's so important that we too, how can we help calm people in their emotional state when they're maybe not even conscious of what they're doing.
I completely 100% agree with you there, because this is my experience as well. So when I'm talking to people in any environment, it could be even in social socially, as well as business elements, when people are always complaining about what they're going through and how they've been treated at work, or they're not able to manage stuff, right? So when you become your self-awareness as a leader, you begin to realize it's for me it's very much about listening, because one of the greatest skill when I went on this journey was listening, looking at their body language, how people are reacting to me, even on Zoom, because I'm so used to face. It was like I had to relearn all the skill sets, right? Hence, that's why I got really passionate about this subject, because I was like, how do I impact people on Zoom? Like, we're on Zoom, and I, not over Zoom, but on Facebook and live, and wherever, to YouTube. I mean, would that have been possible 2 years ago? It's a completely different world, right?
Yeah, well, change is inevitable. You have
Exactly.
to embrace. You don't know what else is coming and what's changing, so be open to it. That's my concept and what I live by. But tell us, what is the other area? Maybe we can talk a little bit about the other area of self-regulation.
Yes, but before we just step away from self-awareness, one of the biggest strengths as a leader, right, happens when you become self-aware, right? You get a clear picture of your strengths and weaknesses. Just to give you a tip, because that is when you realize where the gap is happening in leadership, right? And then,
Definitely.
which leads nicely onto self regulation, which means that leaders who regulate themselves effectively rarely attack other colleagues around there or their teams verbally. They don't make any rash decisions, right? So they always have this check-in how they make their decisions. Like when people make rash decisions, they're very emotional, whereas when they become about self-regulating or managing themselves, their decisions are very driven, thought about, and just basically managing their feelings as well as the people they work with around them. Yeah, because that's the critical piece, right? They begin to become aware of how other people are feeling, so they put themselves in their shoes, like looking at the not viewpoint, but looking at their story, how they are reacting to certain situations, right? And that is the critical link when you become regulate, management, I should say.
Definitely. So first, yes, is to be aware. I think if we don't know what we don't know, how are you planning to do something about it? Because you don't know. But now that you know that something triggers me, something, you know, what gets me upset, what gets me going, what excites me, and all of that. That now I can regulate myself. That I don't go overboard in certain things. I don't even go too low or whatever. But I think of regulating in that aspect, our emotion side of it is that how do we control us? And I do
Yes.
believe that all of us, right? All of us, the only thing that we can control is we. I can't control how Sadhna is gonna feel about me and what Sadhna is thinking. I can't control what Sadhna is gonna go do after this session here. I can't control that, right? And so what I can control, though, it's myself. I can control my thoughts, which is going to lead to my emotions that I will be feeling. So indeed, being able as leaders to have that kind of self-regulation in our emotion is so important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, with that, if I may add, right? Because one of the important skills I learned personally as going through the journey of emotional intelligence is, holding myself accountable of what actually is going on, right? So, when instead of blaming, when something, let's look at conflict, when you're dealing with someone who's difficult person, right? I've had that in my, when I worked in organizations, right? They blame you. In fact, I went through a journey where someone thought I was after their position, but there was no such thing, but it was in their mind, right? And there was it resulted in conflict. But then I decided that it was me to hold myself accountable and not get into their mind, and the way they're reacting, and my behavior should be, my integrity, my values as well, know my values, how I want to react to the situation. So it was like open communication and speaking about to the person, finding out what the problem was. And that was the first step to resolving that particular issue. But it took time, but it's a question of how you deal with it. I'm not sure if
Definitely.
you've had those kind of examples. I'm sure you had loads.
I have met so many people that just keep blame on others. They either blame themselves too. So whether you blame you or you blame somebody else for why they're feeling that way, why they're having a bad day, why this thing didn't work out the way. Oh, it's because this other person didn't do this or they didn't say this or oh, so much blame. And I do believe when we are in a blame mentality is that we have become the victim.
Yes.
And you start questioning yourself as to why did this have to happen to me, and it's all about you. Now you've gone into this spiral, I would say, and it would not get any better if you continue blaming other people for your outbursts per se. Sometimes some parents would blame the kids. Oh, the kids are making too much noise, or the kids did this or did that, make they reacted and did something. So we could blame our teams, we could blame the government, we could blame the all of the leaders around the world right now with this COVID, and we could blame everybody, but
Everybody else. Yeah.
and just hands off approach on this here. But
And
yeah.
to your point as well, it's like, how do you react to that situation personally, right? So instead of blaming, it's looking at what detaches you from that blame. Is it like is the external world, it's not your fault. We know this, right? What is going on right now is not our fault, right? And the circumstances that have created, they're not necessarily our fault. It's how we react to those kind of situations and awareness and emotions, right? So it's, and also one of the things, I always tell, when I work with clients, there's one of the biggest things I say to them, right? Because it creates a lot of anger, frustration. How do you, nobody expresses this, right? Because how do you deal with that anger? What is the first step of dealing with that anger when you feel it? So here's, I'm going to put it out to who is listening. So the next time you feel like that, it's question of just stopping, not reacting, and maybe even taking, I do this often, right? Take few deep breaths, right? I don't know about you, Shanti, but I am such into these taking deep breaths to calm myself down before I actually even speak, right? So it's calming your nervous system down, your cortisol, which all the endorphins, that anger comes with anger in your body. And that's another camp, whole of another, how your brain activates all those activities, neurons or pathways.
Yeah, indeed. I think it's about also exercise and mindfulness.
Yes.
I found the more I practice mindfulness, I learned that when I got angry, I stopped breathing.
Wow.
I am not breathing as per
Exactly.
normal, and because I'm doing that, it tenses my body, and
Yes.
and then the anger even get more worse because now I don't have enough oxygen circulating in my body. And but I found that about me. So indeed, when you started about breathing, I remember myself right away that okay, I learned that because I became aware of that about me. I start taking deep breath, and deep breath in a sense that it's deep enough that my tummy is moving, because some
Yes.
of us breathe. I learned one thing that many of us, when we were babies, we learn how to breathe properly, and then as we grow, we we suddenly stop doing, the right way of breathing, and we have like a shallow breathing that it's not circulating. You're not having enough oxygen as it should, how you're supposed to breathe. But yeah, I've learned that, and so now I start taking deep breath and make sure that it fills up my lungs, my tummy every day. I could see it moving, so I know that I'm breathing properly, and indeed it does help me to calm down.
Yeah, because the technique I normally, teach people, right? So when they talk about breathing, just to give the community a feel. So the next time it's like, you breathe in for 4, hold for 4, let out for 4. Yeah, because that's 4, 4, 4. You will always remember, because when you're breathing in from your diaphragm for 4, you have to do this silently, yes, and not in if you're in a, the big conference room or wherever you go going, it's done. I've done it myself, because I turned around the other way and, done my breathing exercises. And I often do that, when I get into that mode state.
Yeah,
So it
I
usually works.
definitely. And I am actually picturing, see you among your team members, and you're breathing and you're counting 1, 2, 3, 4. And they're going to be looking at you. What's wrong with you? But yes, indeed, I know we may be laughing about it, but indeed,
It's, yeah,
breathing,
it's serious.
I've heard this from so many speakers and so many research talk about how, breathing helps calm yourself down back, and get you back into maybe the perspective that you should be in. And so indeed, learning to breathe, I think, yeah, it's so funny that we talk about unlearning bad habits, and some of us really need to unlearn how we learn to breathe sometime, wherever the path got disrupted in the way we breathe. But unlearning that way and learning back the right way of how we should be breathing to help us calm down.
Oh yeah, because that came to me, last year when COVID was so full on. Because in London was in total lockdown, right? So I'm sure it was everywhere in the world, right? And those practices saved, mentally as well. Just to calm your brain down. It was simple enough to implement, because it comes with practice as well, with the breathing exercise. If you do it one day, forget the next, it doesn't work. It's a practicing. Even if you're not angry, just practice it, because it's also, it rewires your brain, into
Exactly.
putting you into action as well, setting you up for the day. How do you want to see as a leader? How do you want to perform today? Because that's the other technique as well, like, not just leave it as anger, but see, if you want to start a day with your breathing exercises, how do you want to focus? That helps as well with breathing, right? So that's another example of your breathing techniques you can use.
Yep, definitely. So let's talk about the other area on motivation.
Oh my God, motivation is a big topic. Is self motivation, is so many theories written about it. But I will simply, I will break it down to simple steps. Self motivated leaders work consistently towards their goals. So, achieving their goals with extremely high standards and the quality of the work they perform. And that's what creates a highly motivated leader. But to create that, there's certain things that should happen, technically, because these are the things that we're not taught, right? So it's re-examining what you do, the job you do you love it? Do you actually like what you do? And it's questioning yourself. I don't know if you've heard of this phase, the 5 whys. Why do you do what you do? What is the purpose behind it? So you keep breaking it down until you know your whys. Yeah, because that is very valuable when it comes to motivation. It's almost, people call it finding your passion, right? Not necessarily in an environment job, but are you passionate about what you do? Right. And that is where when you ask these questions, what is personal questions, why you do what you do? I'm sure because we are both passionate in our field, and that's why we're here talking about, we're motivated to do this, right?
Yep, definitely. And so indeed, the motivation is a really large topic to cover, and there are many areas that we can go into with indeed self-motivated leaders. I honestly think that motivation must come from within.
Yeah.
And indeed, when we know our why are you here? Why are you choosing to do this particular thing? Why, whether it's a job or a task or something, why do you want to be in that company? Every aspect that you will pull your motivation from these, knowing those whys. Why do I want to do this particular thing? And so every morning you wake up, it's easy to go and start doing it. And even if you're sick, even if whatever you're going through, you are
Yeah.
just so motivated to go do it because you want,
Yeah.
you enjoy doing what you're doing, right? Nobody have to tell you to go do it, or bribe you, or with whatever reward, so that, oh, that's why I'm doing it. But it just comes from within, why you do what you do. So motivation so key. And we all, that's just one thing we're talking about your why. In motivation, there are many aspects
Other
else we can
aspects.
look at in how we get motivated.
Yeah,
you
there's a
know
whole
hmm
science behind the motivation, science of motivation. There's another theory completely, but that's very, that could take us a whole 30 minutes just to discuss that. And one of the things with motivation is just for leaders, right? To lead by example is also being optimistic. So when when there's bad news, it's very good for change. In companies, businesses, change is all around us right now, right? So you deal with changes optimistically, even though there is weakness in the bad news. But they emotionally intelligent leaders, when they have this motivation behind them, power, they actually see bad news as a way forward to change, right? So they see good in the bad, if that's the quote.
Indeed. So it's seeing the opportunities in whatever they're facing with, and not as challenges, but okay, what is something we need to grow into here now, and seeing it from a different angle, indeed. So indeed, as you said, it's a big topic to talk about. So let's touch even a little bit on the last two areas of empathy and social skills.
Oh yeah, empathy. Oh my god, empathy is my favorite. It's absolutely, I could go on empathy about, because today, in today's leadership, I think empathy is the key. The new, modern, emotionally intelligent leaders, empathy is the key, right, to the success of any organization, any business, right? Because when new leaders have empathy, they have the ability, to put themselves in other people's situations. They help to develop their own teams. The challenges challenge others in the way, if there's acting unfairly, right? So they know to give constructive feedback, right? Because the biggest thing with empathy is, like, leaders have a way of giving constructive feedback, and the listening. They're able to listen to the what the teams are saying, not making judgment calls. In fact, also tend to, I don't know, inspire people as well. It comes again, we go to motivation, right? When it comes to empathy.
Yep, indeed, empathy. Something I was reading, and it says an empathetic person often has the highest degree of emotional intelligence.
Yes.
And so, in this day and age, right now, with what's going on in our world, how important it is for leaders now to be empathetic and towards their team members, even families, even, I would even go so far with these examples that I see parents, with their kids them online school, and the teachers themselves, it's something new for them. They weren't trained, I would say, to handle something like this, now just shifting from in person to online. And I see how some parents also so hard on the teachers, you know but on for them to understand, yes, the parents is going through something, it's new for them too, but can they also see it from the teacher side there also? So how can you empathize, on both ends, being empathetic in that situation of what's happening,
Yeah.
and be, able to support one another through it. And I think that's where the emotional intelligence comes in, then lashing out at people, and not understanding this is also new for them.
Yes.
So,
And like you've just touched on a really important point, right? People forget, like, you empathy is also in personal life as well, right? Because you're surrounded by family, like children, how they go through what they go through, right? But it's also important in companies and organizations, right? So empathy, if managed well, right, you become very highly developed, emotionally intelligent leader. And even leader in your home, people you work with, people you live with, because you're aware of everything that's going on without you personally, sometimes, we take on best part is other people's emotions as well, right? So it's how do you detach from that emotional, being focused in the sense on the situation rather than getting emotionally attached to the situation. Do you see what I mean? So that's the difference with being empathy.
so sometimes I teach some aspect of this in, sometimes you have a situation, but being able to empathize is having that person alongside you and having the situation on the other side of the room per se, and so that you can relate to them coming together to solve that problem than just seeing them as the problem per se.
Yeah.
So how can you empathize by putting yourself in their shoes, what they might be feeling, what might they be going through, and this other aspect. And so, I'll give one example here. A personal example is that my teenage daughter, so she, it's a phase. We all know that, and that they go through. And so she, sometimes the way she was dressing is like, with these pants and these more masculine kind of dressing. And then I keep asking her, why do you want to wear that? Why do you want to buy that? Why? And she went and found one of my album when I was her age and showed me how I dressed. I was like, I had to laugh. So how can I understand and empathize what she's going through, because I can put myself in her shoes and understand.
Yeah.
I've been through it, and so sometimes, yes, we might not go through what the other person is feeling or experiencing, but then we can step down from where we're at and just picture ourselves there. What would we do?
Yes,
How would
exactly.
we handle this? How would we be thinking? What decisions would we have taken if we were put in that situation? And so I think that's where, we get to understand and empathize better. And it comes down back to us leaders, that we are not so busy that we cannot stop to think and empathize, that I don't have time to think about that right now, and you just moving on. And so all of that will affect you being able to stop and listen and be able to empathize.
You've actually just touched on a point as well, because sometimes, in your in companies, businesses, you're busy, and then this person who's, they really need, for you to empathize with it. It's also finding the right time. Yeah. So if the timing is having showing empathy at the right time as well, when it's needed as well, all the time, right? And rather than just not having it. So that, that is quite critical as well, being empathetical in everything.
Yep. So tell us about social skills.
Oh my God, that's a golden nugget here. Social skills, yeah. So socials, as leaders, when you have the right social skills, you're a great communicator, right? This is where the social skills really goes high in emotional intelligence, right? It it's the leaders who are good at social skills are also good at managing the change and resolving conflict. We talked about conflict, right? So being diplomatic, they um, they never leave things unsatisfied. They've got the ability to resolve that situation, right? So it's having a really good, strong communication, and it's basically gives you a platform to learn conflict resolution. Because if you've got that high social skills, you will be able to deal with any situation that's thrown at you without reacting to it. And I think that is the critical piece to having, the social skills. And that's just a small part of it. And it's also like, your communication skills will be, it goes tenfold or 10x if you like.
So it's all about relationships here, and indeed relationships with your team, your boss, your
Yeah.
or your leader, your family, your friends. So how do you communicate with these people? How do you socialize? And I don't know, with this pandemic, how much of this skills is getting built right now. People being able to socialize with one another and maintain, good relationships. And I see this even with our kids now. You go somewhere and they don't know how to communicate with one another.
Yeah.
They don't know how to start a conversation. I remember one of my daughter came and asked, Mom, I have to speak to this person. How do I start off the conversation? I was like, oh my gosh. I remember once being on a train in England, and when I look down the line, it's like everybody's on their phone.
Yeah.
I'm looking at my mom and the two of us. Well, obviously, I don't have a phone for that country, so I can't be on my phone either. But it was just an observation to see, how would we build our social skills. So I set a target for myself. If I'm going anywhere, I must go and meet at least 5 person that I never spoke to before. If I'm
Actually,
on a plane or so, the person next to me, I must form a conversation, because for me, I would honestly just stay quiet in my corner. But to build this, get out of this mentality, and how do I connect with people, and how can I share, how can I add value to them? Because
yeah.
if that's my purpose, then how am I going to add value if I don't form any kind of conversation and communicate with them? And
Yeah.
so those are my goals that I set for myself. What
Oh
about
no,
you?
actually, it's perfect because I'll just share a story with you. Because it was 2 weeks ago, was my nephew's 30th birthday. It was a surprise birthday party. None of the family organized it. It was his friends. And I got there. The first person arrived was his aunt, and he wasn't even there. So I had no clue who his friends were. So for me, it was a challenge. I'm an introvert, right? As you know, as you've learned. Today is just, yeah. So I just made a goal for myself, like you just said. So I went and introduced myself to my nephew's friends. I just basically talked to every one of them and said, well, how do you know him? What are your, tell me about it. And I took them into conversations I never thought I would have, and they turned into the most enriching conversations I've ever had with that generation, because they are the new generation. And it
Mhm.
was so powerful as well for me. I was thinking, okay, this is something I've learned. Yeah. So it's having that social skills. It's, this was a family situation, but can you imagine having those skills in the companies you work for? That will take you to another level.
So I would think too, like for leaders, one area would be great is that, taking time out to listen to your team members, and whether
Yes.
it's through a coaching or a mentoring session, that you get to know them a little bit more. And so sometimes I do that with our teams, just tell me about what's happening here. Let
Mm.
let me hear, and then I even go as far as to ask them, okay, what can I do to help you here?
Yeah.
And so, but it's not doing it because someone tell you, oh, you're a leader and you need to do this, you need to learn this, you need to apply this. But it's doing it out of genuine care, genuine, you know being genuinely involved in that
Yeah.
person's life because you want to, not
Mhm.
because you're obligated to. And so, developing that relationship with them on a different level. So it's just not about meeting with goals for the company, but
Yeah.
also how do you connect with them with their personal goals too, and be genuinely interested to see them excel and be good in whatever areas they want to get into and what's not. And so I think the emotional intelligence, there's so many things. Who knows what's coming in the future? Some other, maybe PQ or something, or or we would learn about IQ and EQ and all
Yeah.
the different Qs. But indeed,
Actually,
mhm,
don't mean to just let me add to the mix of this. There's a new one. It's called motivation intelligence. It's in the pipeline. So that's we touched on motivation, but there is also a platform for motivation intelligence. So that's a whole lot of another platform. Yeah. So that's just a new thing I've only learned recently. So that's why I'm sharing. That
yes, and we are abundant people that we give. But
exactly.
indeed, so Sadhna, emotional intelligence indeed is such a big, huge topic to talk on. And as leaders, some of us may not want to accept that we need to work on our emotional intelligence. Yes, we may have high IQ and, we have the skills and we have every aspect of, success on that end there, but then what about your emotion and how is that getting in the way of some of those success? Could you have been even more successful than what you are today? So ask yourself those questions, and maybe there's many emotional intelligence assessment to see where you're at with these different areas of your life, and you get a choice to choose whether you want to improve it or not. So
Yeah.
I do believe it's always a choice in what we know now that we become aware. If you didn't know there were such thing as emotional intelligence for leaders, that they need to have these behavior skills in this aspect, but now, so you're not in an unconscious incompetent state right now, so you're conscious there's something there. You know what, go read up more on it, maybe take a class on it or something that is going to help you to keep working on this aspect of your life. So Sadhna, is there any parting points or so, or you would like to add for the viewers?
Oh, there'll be so much more, but it's just basically being self-aware and self-regulate yourself as a leader. And if you master those two skills, everything else will follow. And it's just being with yourself. One thing I would add is being with yourself more than anything else to master that kind of intelligence, right? Who you are as a person, and why you do what you do, and how you are helping other people around you. I think these are my passing thoughts. But thank you for having me. It's been a joy, as they you call it. Going through my favorite subject. Which I'm passionate about, obviously.
And so, thank you, Sadhna. Indeed, you have added value to all of us here. And as we learn and grow together, I could only think we can get better together as leaders. And so,
Yeah,
thank you very much for your time to input aside and to meet and hear, this topic from for leaders as we are looking at growing leaders, leaders that are transformational, leaders that are highly emotional intelligent in this case here. So thank you very much for your time, and we will meet in our next session next week, Thursday. And you stay safe and take your vitamins.
thank you. Bye.
Bye.